Hello, my name is Maurice Washington. I want to welcome everybody to another episode of Executive Talk. Those who are watching live or those that are listening later on our podcast, thank you so much for being here. Just want to warn everybody, in Executive Talk, our job is to tell the truth. Our job is to ensure that you take what you have going on in your business, you have the opportunity to grow. And that's both spiritually, mentally, everything that you can imagine, so that way you can be the best business owner that possible. We need to change the way in which we're operating because the world is just getting worse as we go day to day. So we're going to hit some topics that are going to hit you personally. So be open to it. Don't point the finger over there or to your left or to your right. Point it right here in the mirror. What can you do? What are you contributing to this? How is this message going to hit you? In every single show, I have to take the same accountability. So I'm just introducing that same accountability to you to ensure that we can, again, take this to the next level. And the next level is ensuring that we as a society are taking accountability for some of the things that are happening to each other. That's the main priority that we need to take accountability for, because there is God that's watching. This is sometimes actually comes off more times than not a warning. This is an opportunity conversation. So again, just relax, pay attention, stop what you're doing for these minutes here, and let's get into this. Today's topic is, and the series that we're about to start is trauma in business. Now, when you think about trauma, when you think about it's like, whoa, yeah, I know a whole bunch of people that have trauma. I know my cousin had trauma from XYZ. I know my sister, I know my brother, I know my father, I know my mother, I know my husband, I know my wife had some kind of trauma in their childhood. And that's what we typically allude trauma to, and make it, make it palatable, so that way we can understand what's going on, and that way we can still be with that person and try to find compassion. I understand our way of doing this, but the problem is we have not done anything to fix it. That's what this show is about. How are we going to start addressing this trauma? Because ultimately, trauma addresses other folks, as everybody is understanding. Those situations that you're having with somebody else, what is that? That's exactly right. It is trauma. It takes a toll on you. So this is why we need to take an interest in today's topic. But I'm going to take you back to the very beginning, because there's something that I found out as I was doing research, and as the Lord was talking to me about creating this message, where this all started from. So let's go ahead and take a peek right here. In Genesis 1 through 3, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So now, there's nothing wrong with that. Everything is perfect. I want you guys to see this pattern here. Everything was perfect. Let's go ahead and take it to Genesis 4 through 5. It reads, "And God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening. There was morning, the first day." Yet again, everything is good. Everything is perfect. Let's keep reading. In Genesis 1, 8 through 10, God called the vault sky, and there was evening. And there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered into one place, so that the dry land may appear." And it was so. Okay. I see no fault. Do you see any fault? Absolutely not. This is why people skip over Genesis, because you're seeing the pattern right here. I'm going to explain it to you in a minute. Let's go ahead and bring up Genesis 1:26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, to rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, and over all the earth itself, and every creature that crawls upon it." Yet again, do you find anything wrong in those statements? Do you find anything wrong within this creation so far? The answer is no. Everything is perfect. Everything is easy. Everything is calm. Let's take it to the next level then. In Genesis 1:27 says, so God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Anything wrong? I'm just testing you. Of course, there's nothing wrong in there. Everything is still perfect. Even mankind was in whose image? It was in perfect image, both male and also female. Perfect image was created at this time. Let's go ahead and keep going. In Genesis 2:15-17, then God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate it, and the Lord commanded him, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die. So let's go ahead and stop right there for a minute, and let's put everything into some context. As I was alluding to, as I was reading those scriptures, I just gave you a few verses, but you know everything God was creating in the first part of Genesis. Everything was perfect. It was so perfect. God gave a blessing to Adam and Eve, so that way, or he gave a blessing to mankind so that they can have kids and keep on developing, right? This is part of God's all creation. When he saw mankind, it was very good to him. When he created the light, when he created the darkness, everything was flowing. Everything was good. When he created mankind, it was very good. In that context, as I was asking those questions, did you see anything wrong? No. You didn't see any trauma. You saw perfection. You saw completeness. You saw operation. You saw a system in place. You saw every single thing was flowing from point A to point Z. Now, once that point A to point Z took place, once he saw his image in Adam specifically, and also he knew Eve would be in that image because he came from Adam, right? You see how that works? So in that image, so that was all right there. But what he did was took Adam and took him into the garden because his image was perfect, because his understanding was perfect, because he had no outside interest of anything except for just being with God and being God's creation. That's all his only thought was. That's how he operated. Then he gave him his first instruction that came with, you are free because of your perfection, because of your understanding, because of how I created this. You are free to eat from anything else. Just stay away from that tree. Do not eat from it, or else you will certainly die. Now let's take that word die. Does anybody have any great connotations or connections when it comes to that word? No, it's not. But that was the first rule. That was the first rule in which God had something attached to within that garden of development. You notice that? Anything else, game on. This tree, game off, game over. I'm telling you right now, game over. You will certainly die if you eat and if you partake of that tree. Okay, so now we have that understanding. Everything, remember, everything was perfect. Even after that instruction, it was perfect. Here's how I know. Here's the next scripture here that we should understand. In Genesis 2:25, Adam and his wife, Adam and Eve, were both naked and they felt no shame. Now again, let's make sure that we're staying mature in this. And they were both naked. They were both in the spirit. They were both in the spirit. There was no shame. They didn't even know that they were naked. They had no clue because they were so deep in the spirit and so operating off of God's creation that they had no knowledge of it. Now they have this instruction. Actually, Adam has this instruction. And so now they go into the garden. This is where it gets a little tricky. In Genesis 3:6, it says, when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some of it and ate it. she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Now, obviously, there's a lot wrong with that. There is a conversation that took place between between the enemy and also Eve. The enemy did not go directly to Adam. Let's be very clear. Everybody knows that. Everybody understands that. But the instruction was with Adam. Eve knew that as well, and that's why she started to have the conversation. This is where the enemy got tricky and brought her to a level of understanding that she did not need to be privy to. She didn't even need to go there. But here's where the manipulation started to take place. This is where the change started to occur. Let's dissect this. The fruit of the tree was good for food and also pleasing to the eye. So the 1 and 2 right there. That means there's an unsatisfaction that the enemy was introducing to her. I know you're hungry. You don't have anything to eat. You don't have anything. Remember, God already said you have everything here. You can eat of any, but just do not eat of this tree. But he brought her to this lowest common denominator, to this disobedience. See, disobedience was already in the garden, and it was in that tree. So now, what else did he do? It was pleasing to the eye. Look at this, Eve. Look. You're unsatisfied. You need something to eat, and it's pleasing to the eye. It looks good, doesn't it? And also, think about this, Eve. It's desirable for gaining wisdom. Do you see how this tree had a whole nother connotation to it? It had a whole different wisdom. It had a whole different, but it also required a lot of the senses to look differently. It had to actually take your senses away from you being okay and doing just fine with everything that you had, because God has clearly already provided everything, and everything is already operating under his glory. But the enemy brought Eve to a place where you still don't have enough. You still, yes, it's pleasing to your eyes. That's why you should make this decision. You need more wisdom. You need more understanding. Right? So you think about those. He brought her to a common denominator that she did not need, but she ate of it. And then the husband, Adam, who was in the garden, who had the instruction first, took some of it and ate it too. Now, let's think about the dysfunction and the things that changed from there. So in Genesis 3:7, then the eyes of both of them were open, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. So now, why is that important? How is Adam and Eve moving at this time? They went from no shame. Let's be very clear. They went from no shame to now the shameful activity in which they started to operate in because of their disobedience has changed. First of all, their eyes were open. They had a whole different perspective. They didn't have this perspective before. You're like, oh, what? They're into a whole nother realm. And it's the realm of disobedience, because that's the tree in which they partook of. And they realized, now see what's going on with their mind, that they were naked. Oh my goodness. Remember, that's why, again, context is so important when it comes to Genesis. This means everything to everything that you read in the rest of the Bible. They were from no shame, but they were naked, but they still had no knowledge of it back in Genesis 2:27. But now in Genesis 3:7, here in the future, they realized they were naked. And because of that, they solved it from their new wisdom. Did they not? This is new wisdom to them. You see what happens? New wisdom has created a new movement. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. See, mankind, they got creative. They have at this time, they've created a whole different pattern of life. You will, and again, remember what God said in Genesis 2:15 through 17. You will certainly, and actually this is on 17, you will certainly die. And because of that death, this is how they started to move. This is some of the traumatic movements they started to make from themselves. Next phase. Let's bring this up. Now in Genesis 3:10. Now, obviously, let's go ahead and figure out why we skipped the middle here. This is to kind of fast forward, but this is when God arrived. It wasn't like God didn't know, but he wanted to check on things. He wanted to see this death because he already knew this death had occurred. Okay, he went to go see where this, and guess what? God called out to Adam. The connection was God. Just the fact that God called out to Adam, realize, and I'm understanding as I'm talking, that there's a disconnect there. Adam, where are you? Where are you? The disconnect, the death has already taken place. And that was a sign of the death, is because when God has to figure out where you are, his son, his creation, when you have to figure out where your creation is, there's a death. There's something missing there. And so, of course, Adam answered, thinking he's still all right. I heard you in the garden, and this is Adam talking to God. And I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. I don't even look presentable to you, God. I mean, look at me. This is crazy. What is this nakedness? You see the move in which Adam made when he died. Both of them made this move. But again, specifically, God reached out to Adam and wanted to figure out where this death has taken place. And so you see the pattern here, everybody. You see how this stuff starts to occur. This is why the first part of the Bible, and the reason why I wanted to bring this up in here in Genesis, is there's two different elements. The Bible, and let me be very clear when I say this, the Bible doesn't get very interesting. This is why people don't talk about Genesis that much. It's another reason why. It does not get interesting until Genesis 3:6. Guess why? We are all love some level of trauma, don't we? We are drawn to the trauma and the drama of everything. That is part of our nature. It's the show, Trauma in Your Business. See, when things were perfect, people don't want to talk about that first part of Genesis because it's like, oh yeah, okay, he created and I got it. So what are you saying? The reason why you want to keep on referring back to Genesis, those that are starting to read the Bible or those that are in the Bible, start understanding what Genesis, there was a level of perfection and holiness that existed within the garden. Because everything hovered in God's glory, in his likeness, and his view. So that holiness is the boring, per se. I'm not attacking the Bible. I know God is my witness. This is the boring part in which people are not drawn to because it's the holy part. But in our unholy part, we're starting to see the rest of the Bible and what God had to do in order to clear us up. So that is the difference in the Bible, is that in Genesis up until 2:27, there's the holiness in which you're experiencing. That's why and that's where God gave his blessings to mankind. Because the holiness was what you're blessed with. Adam and Eve had no issues with each other, did they? So that's why I wanted to make a point in. So now here we are. We're actually post Genesis 3:6. That's where life stopped and a new life began for mankind. And it's called trauma. So now let's go ahead and bring back to real time here. Actually, let me bring that statement back. Everything is real time. This is not the past. This is present day. So now let's talk about husband and wife. In every show that you will always see me refer to this, because this is the pattern in which, this is another pattern in which we see. And I'm alluding to that Adam and Eve. See, typically, and this is mankind's move, is that husband and that wife think they're okay. There's a 99% chance this is a story. You know what? My father and mother, they were crazy, or my father and mother had a great family, so I know I'm qualified. So I'm going to go ahead, and my love for this woman and my love for this man is just off the charts. I want to be with him all the time. I just love him. Okay? Or I can do better than what my parents did. I know I was a single mother, or I know I was raised by a single mother, but I know I'll be a great father. I'm just going to go ahead and just make things happen. I'll be better than my father ever was. Or you'll find, I was just raised by my father. I was in a divorce, my parents divorced, but guess what? I'm still okay. That is mankind's. This is this presentation for this husband and wife. This is what's being brought to the table, and the understanding in which the reason why they loved each other. They said in the statements, without saying it, I can override my history. I can override the way that I am. I can love this man with all that I have, regardless of some of my stuff that I still have. This is this man saying, I can love this woman regardless of saying the stuff I've seen him growing up. I can still love this woman till death do us part. Till death do us part, people. This is what people are committing to. A lifelong experience with another person with their own situation. Now, not one part of that I say they were doing okay. I just mentioned what people come to the table with in their understanding. They have their history, and they think they can, sometimes people, actually majority of the time, people think they can outmaneuver their understanding. Let me go ahead and bring this to the table, folks. It is impossible to outmaneuver your history. It's impossible to outmaneuver the way that you do things. It's impossible. Just hear me out for the rest of this whole series, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. But it's impossible. But typically, this is why, again, love is the strongest vehicle. Love is the strongest emotion. But when it's backed without knowledge, when it's backed by trauma, that is not love. That is trauma. That's what they're talking about as far as trauma bonding. This is not considered love. This is an ideal of love. This is what I would love to see happen. This is my dream. This is my vision. But how do you get there is a whole different dynamic. There's a responsibility when it comes to love. God is the originator of love. You're not. But we come to the table thinking that we have transcended because we've evolved so much as a society. Everything is so fast. We just know. No. Again, don't believe me? The divorce rate is at its all-time high and is getting higher. It's actually getting to the point where marriage, the whole institution, is being obliterated. Let's be real. People are so discouraged when it comes to marriage, it's unbelievable. That's how much knowledge we know. That's how much our history, how much we thought we can actually override our history with each other and do it better. And the reason why it's showing up the way that it is. So now, not only are these two experiencing that thought process, guess who else is experiencing? It's called kids. These little hearts of kids, little innocent beings. They're over there watching you. They're actually determining their quality of life, their marriage, their opportunity based on seeing you in the family setting. They're seeing their father, they're seeing their mother, they're seeing their mother talk about their husband, about their father, more specifically. That's her husband, but that's their father. How you as a father are treating your wife, but their mother. So there's two different scenarios, two different perspectives happening at one time in this family setting. And you may be dealing with your wife on a certain level. You may be dealing with your husband on a certain level because of your relationship with each other. But if that thing is not done correctly, understand these kids right here. I don't care if you have one, I don't care if you have two, I don't care if you have seven. Doesn't matter. They all are seeing what you're doing from their own perspective, from their own knowledge, from their own understanding. And this trauma, this understanding flourishes through a family setting. It starts at home first. Everybody always says it. It always starts at home first. The way that you're doing things currently with your husband and how you treat him has been a perspective on how you grew up seeing things, either on TV and most importantly in the household. The same difference when it comes to how you treat your wife, sir. It is a perspective in which you saw growing up. You don't think, and typically husband and wife, what happens to them is they think they're the only ones that are experiencing their issues with each other. Who else is experiencing in this photo? The kids. Absolutely correct. They are experiencing the relationships trauma. The things that are not there is trauma. Let me bring that up one more time and let me get on the screen. The things that they are experiencing is trauma. They did not ask for that trauma to be introduced into their life, but it's right there. That's all they know. That's all you know. And that's exactly what they start to replicate. And this is the pattern in which society works. So let's go ahead and break down trauma. Sin is trauma. Our sinful nature is the trauma in which causes defeat. It causes death. See, again, Genesis is probably one of the most important books to me. I'm going to introduce it to you as one of the ones, but go ahead and go ahead and we'll debate that later. Actually, it shouldn't be a debate. We just kind of understand what we understand. But for me, Genesis is one of the most important books. Why? Because even then, even that sin, the tree still exists. Did you know that? Do not eat of that tree. Do not partake of the cigarettes. Do not partake of the marijuana. Do not partake of alcohol. Do not partake of these things because you will certainly die. There are certain things that you should do, and there's a ton of things, and that's what the rest of the Bible is. There are certain things you really should not do, or else you will certainly die. That is God repeating himself over and over in different scenarios. But sin is trauma. How do you know? Does your sin affect others? Does your sinful nature bother people? Does your sinful nature cause people to stumble? Does your sinful nature make people want to just do some weird stuff on the back end? I guarantee there's bloodshed on the carpet. Don't shut this program off now. Stay with me. Sin is trauma. It hurts. Your trauma becomes somebody else's reality. Your trauma becomes your kid's reality. Okay? Let's just be honest here. Here's something else we need to know. Trauma is in the blood of every human being. So now, why is that important? It's called the generational curse. Remember, God cursed mankind in the garden. Their trauma is what we're doing, was what he's cursing. He's cursing our sin from our disobedience from the garden. That's why I say Genesis is one of the most important books you can ever think of. Because again, that's where the first cursing came from. That's the thing that needs to be broken up. Even in Deuteronomy, I believe, he said, I will curse your kids 4 generations deep, fathers, for your sinful nature, if you don't clear this up. Where else are you going to find it? It's in the blood. You can point to a kid and say, you act just like your father. You act just like your mother. And you will see those habits. If you spend enough time with that person's father and mother, they do. That's the same trauma still floating around in there. You can see a person, your wife's childhood trauma. You can see your husband's childhood trauma and how he operates. Those things that are not functioning and quite going well, childhood trauma is still radiating within the blood. That's why that's why marriages, there's the number one reason why marriages don't make it. If you're around that trauma long enough, what do you think you want to do? See, everybody presented their love, presented their unconditional love, their willingness. And so you saw somebody give you their plan of execution of getting married, but you didn't see their plan of dealing with anything else. But again, trauma is in the blood of every human being. Your knowledge is trauma. Well, Maurice, why would you say that? I went to Yale. I went to Michigan. I mean, I'm not talking about those colleges, but just as an example purposes, that's trauma. As long as one thing that happened in the garden is our knowledge from God got severed. That's why we have even a hard time being obedient. Why? Because our knowledge is traumatized. Remember, we chose a tree for gaining wisdom. Did she not? Did he not? See why I keep on referring back to Genesis? Your knowledge here is a different kingdom. Your knowledge here is a kingdom to survival and death. See, there's two kingdoms here. And that's what we have to remember when it comes to the Bible. But your knowledge is trauma. If you're unhealed, you haven't dealt with that stuff, you're bringing in not only your bloodline, you also bring in knowledge from your trauma to the present day and also into the future. Your kids are understanding from your knowledge, and that's exactly what you provide for them, right? You want to tell them how to do certain things. Of course, they're going to ask you. You tell them to depend on you. And what they're depending on is your knowledge and your understanding to lead them down the pathway. And of course, what are they going to do? They're going to follow you. That's the first instruction. That's the person that they trust the most. So now your perception is traumatic. It's all trauma. So now remember, in the garden, what did you choose? You chose you chose disobedience for what your eyes were allured to. So you're having an allure towards trauma. That's why it's another reason why it's so hard to get out of. Because if you don't have any wisdom, if your eyes are weak, if you're blinded to what's going on, if you don't think there's a tree, if you think we're far removed from the Bible, your perception is trauma. So what you provide to your husband, what you provide to your wife, what you provide to your kids is all trauma because it's not the right perception. There's something to say about something being right. Everybody needs it. Everybody looks for it. So then what else do we have here? A person's trauma sin is always hidden. It's always hidden. Why is that so important? Let's think about it, folks. What did Adam and Eve do in the garden? They hid those fig leaves. Do you think if you would have known that person's trauma before you got married, or you probably even knew it? That's what's so crazy about, folks. You probably knew about that person's trauma. They told you, but you said, "Oh, well, we love each other. Our love will override that." So you didn't realize until you lived with that person. Oh my goodness, that's what you were talking about. Why are you frustrated now in your marriage? You saw the trauma. He or she may have even told you about it. What you're mad about is the fact they didn't do anything about it. But a person's trauma is hidden. There are some things that the person themselves don't even realize that they're doing, and they will not acknowledge their trauma in which they are in. You're trying to help them understand what you see, that I can fight you. Remember, you're not God. You're not the one I need to serve. I need to worship. But I'm going to fight you. And what are they fighting you with? They're fig leaves. Remember what I keep on saying in this statement. Genesis is one of the most important functions of the Bible. Most important books, because it has our identity right there. It's stuck. That's why the enemy was cursed at that moment, because he stuck us right there. There is a severing. You have not moved on since that moment if you have not repented. So those fig leaves that we saw in the garden, you still have them today. That's what's hidden in your marriage. That's what's hidden from you. That's why you can't see, because you are still using your fig leaves for your knowledge. Because again, what's going on behind the scenes? Remember, this is the first time they experienced shame. That is part of the traumatic component of people, is when they have shame attached to them. That's why this is so important. That's why these fig leaves are so important. So now, a rebellious natured person is a sign of unrepentant trauma. I'm going to read that one more time, because this is one of the most important things that I'm saying today. A rebellious natured person is a sign of unrepentant trauma. You know what's so crazy about people in general is we think the rebellious component is a rebellious nature person is cute. We laugh it off, like, you're so crazy. I would have never done that. You're my buddy. You're my wife. You're my girlfriend. I want to marry you. I know you're just messing with me. You're just always fighting me. Okay. You're so cute. Oh, your husband. Oh, you're always doing some crazy stuff, but I love that crazy man. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Doesn't sound good as we're talking, doesn't it? Does it? See, that rebellious nature person, that's actually a sign of the unrepentant trauma. That is what they're functioning on. That's what they learned. That's what their knowledge is stuck in. Those issues that you're having with your wife, sir, that's unrepentant trauma. That's that rebelliousness that you think is so cute. It's not so cute when you're battling in the household, is it? Wife, it's not so cute when you're battling with your husband, because he can't really stop doing what he's doing to you. That rebelliousness is trauma. Now you're eating of that trauma that you're receiving from that person. That rebellious nature from your kids is not so cute when they take your car and run off with it and almost, have an incident at somewhere else, get pulled over by the cops, and you get this weird call in the middle of the night. Or they keep on taking your credit card out of your pocket or out of your purse or wallet or whatever. It's not so cute, is it? A rebellious nature person is unrepentant trauma. You can actually see it in kids. The trauma is actually developing. Yes, it is cute for the moment. Let me be clear. But again, when it becomes a headache, when it becomes a pattern, when it becomes a stress, I can't wait for you to get out the house. You see how you're trying to even divorce your kids because of their trauma? I hope this show is starting to make sense, because that's about how serious this trauma is. This is about how serious a rebellious nature person is in your life. It's about how serious trauma is within the business. But before we get to the business, we're actually going to talk about how the enemy flourishes with this trauma and how this is developed. Because again, this is just the beginning, but we also need to talk about how it's developed, because this is what the enemy wanted. I want to thank you all again for sticking with us through this show. This is a little longer than normal, so I apologize about that, but I would need to ensure this particular one gets through. This is deep. It's even deep for me as I'm talking. I'm listening to myself like, wow. I'm not boasting. I'm not glorifying myself. Let me be very clear. It's just hitting me in a lot of different ways right now. But folks, take this trauma seriously. This is the force that needs to be reckoned with. We need to have it dealt with, because if you understand anything about this show, I know 20 memories and thoughts and even present day thoughts are popping in your mind as you listen to the show. I know it's starting to click. I know it. Not because I'm saying it, but because, again, if you're feeling any way I'm feeling, especially starting to really dissect trauma from a spiritual point of view, it makes a ton of sense. And you may be looking at yourself as well, which is the most important factor. But again, I'm going to save some more for our next show. I want to thank everyone for listening, for watching today's segment. But we'll be in part 2 of our series next week. I'm going to see you next week. And hey, look, I have to get back to work. So we'll see you again.